Rugby Australia sacked the star last week for what they call high-level breach of their code of conduct, but it's now been confirmed Folau will contest that decision and has requested a code of conduct hearing. Authorities say that will be heard as soon as possible. Lance Santos reports.
Israel Folau is a special rugby player, and everyone knew that from the moment he first pulled on a Wallabies jersey. The fullback looked like a player formed by scientists in a lab who were trying to create the perfect rugby player. His first test match, Australia against the British and Irish Lions, showed just how good he was. Israel took on the best from the Northern Hemisphere's 4 top sides and made it look easy. 2 tries in his first test match, and he was on the way to becoming the world's best. Internationally, Folau continued to shine in an otherwise inconsistent Wallaby side. His highlight, a World Cup final in 2015, in which Australia would lose. On the field, he was consistently excellent. Off it, he believed he was guided by something much greater. In 2011, as his career was beginning to take off, Folau changed from the Mormon faith that he grew up with to the Assemblies of God Church, a fiercely evangelical congregation which has a strong following in the Pacific Islands. Their beliefs on homosexuality are pretty narrow-minded and straightforward. The Assemblies of God followers believe it is a sin. They also believe that the church has a mission to seek and save all who are lost in sin. And this is where the sporting world has now found itself, in between a discussion of religious freedoms and inclusive values of a modern world.
Israel Folau is back in hot water.
Well, Israel Folau is definitely sticking to his gun.
But it's not the end of it, really, is it?
No, that's right. He has been sacked.
Israel Folau will fight his sacking by Rugby Australia.
For the early part of his career, there was no conflicting issue, but that all changed in 2017.
I am sorry for all of the hateful and stupid things which have been said and are going to be said until we win marriage equality.
When Australia joined many other nations in the world legalising gay marriage, Israel Folau came out strongly on the no side of the Australian government's national vote. Folau said he would not support gay marriage. While personal opinions are accepted, it was in direct contravention of what the Wallabies as a collective international sporting body had said they would support. In effect, the very best player stood apart from the rest of the entire sporting body.
7,817,200.
The Australian people have spoken in their millions, and they have voted overwhelmingly yes for marriage equality.
After the vote passed in Australia, Folau's beliefs were consigned to a disagreement by many and an awkward opinion in an otherwise progressive nation. But Folau's beliefs again came to the fore in 2018 when he took to Instagram to tell people that gays were going to hell. Many believed then that that was the point of no return and Folau should be sacked for hate speech.
Thank you.
Rugby Australia's new boss was stuck. The national team wasn't getting the results on the field, and now their star player was causing a scandal. All the while, Folau continued his quality on the field. He is now the top try scorer of all time in Super Rugby. The latter part of his career was set, having just signed a new lucrative deal which would have him playing rugby for the Wallabies until 2022. Until now.
People are talking about the freedom of speech. For me, it's not freedom of speech, it's hate speech. I think the world is going down the toilet at the moment.
Folau, I'm calling you out. I thought your first comment regarding gays going to hell was outrageous. But this latest post is, this is out the gate.
Earlier this month, Israel Folau again took to Instagram with a post stating that hell awaits homosexuals. Rugby Australia took no time to weigh up the pros and cons of the debate. Folau's multi-million-dollar contract would be torn up. They say he had breached the terms of his contract and an agreement he had made last time he voiced his religious beliefs on social media.
Rugby Australia and New South Wales Rugby Union have today served Israel Folau
with a breach notice over the posts on social media platforms Twitter and Instagram on April 10.
His career in the green and gold is now over. In the wash-up, there is now a debate over Folau's personal opinions over the beliefs of his employers. Former Wallabies coach, now right-wing radio host Alan Jones, believes Folau is being persecuted for his beliefs.
Because we're going down a very, very narrow road here, and this has gone on and on and on, this crap, and I'm telling you, out there, people now are terrified of saying anything. They are frightened. They don't know what they can say.
He has now become the darling of a reactionary part of the Australian media that believes he should have the right to say whatever he likes.
Few people would know or care about this if Rugby Australia hadn't made this into a great cause and turned Folau almost into a martyr by trying to sack him, what he sees as his faith.
But that's what he believes. I don't believe it's right, and I don't believe he should say it, but I don't think we should be sitting there and taking the absolute mickey out of his religion as much as we don't like it.
This is what Folau's legacy will now be. A battle on the internet about religious freedoms, freedom of speech and attacks on minorities. His rugby now secondary. A player of the highest quality of limitless potential reduced to a very modern quandary. The Wallabies' very slim chances for the World Cup now lay in tatters. Their greatest weapon is gone. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, but for Israel Folau, it has been worth millions in lost earnings. For a player whose faith guided him throughout his illustrious career, it has now cost him everything.
Well, former Wallaby star Peter FitzSimons has told Beyond the Game what he'd say to Folau if they met face to face.
I would say, Israel, what on earth were you thinking? You must have known after everything that happened last year, when you alienated your teammates, you alienated the gay community, you alienated the administrators. Everybody was hugely annoyed, and Australian rugby lost a lot of ground. You signed a contract for $1 million a year saying you wouldn't do that again, and you still did it. So what I would say is, mate, you got nowhere to go here. Taxi! He's going somewhere, but he's not a part of Australian rugby.
What does it mean to play for Australia, and how significant a mark was it for ex-players to have Folau acting this way while representing the country?
Look, I'm from the amateur era, and it was a really big deal. I mean, it still is. It's a very big deal to wear the Wallaby jersey. And, you know, ideally, you're representing Australia. And there's that feeling as you run out on the field and you're about to do battle, we're doing our very best to do the best for Australia. And I don't know, with Israel Folau talking about gays are going to hell, that is not the Australia I know, and it's certainly not the Australians most Australians know. We don't believe in that nonsense.
What do you have to say to people like your former coach Alan Jones that this is a question of freedom of speech? Does that argument hold water with you?
People like Alan Jones talk about freedom of speech. That is an embarrassing nonsense. Nobody's dragging Israel Folau off to prison saying you can't say that. Sure, you can say that, but you don't have freedom from consequences, and the consequences of saying that are you breach underemployment law, you breach your contract. See you later.
Will the Australian rugby public accept this decision, even if the World Cup chances are now even slimmer?
The Australian rugby public totally accepts the idea that Israel Folau's got to go. I mean, everybody, I saw it, I think it was last Wednesday afternoon, I saw the post, I said on Twitter, he'll have to go. He'll go by sundown tomorrow. Answer, he was gone by sundown the next day.
When you see England's Billy Vunipola given a talking to and nothing more over his defence of Folau, do you think the game really has to look deeper into the issue of homophobia?
Rugby union's been pretty good globally lately on homophobia, and it's taken the view that, I mean, the thing about rugby is it's the most inclusive of all games. If you want to be a basketballer, it helps if you're 2 metres tall. If you want to be a sprinter, you've got to be very fast. If you want to be a shot putter, you've got to have big shoulders. Rugby's not like that. Rugby says if you're short and fat and squat, no ball skills, you're in the front row. If you're built like a thermometer, haven't got a friend to bless yourself with, you're out on the wing. If you're a 5'8" egotistical mongrel, you're the 5'8". It's inclusive. We want everybody to have a game. And we want straights, we want gays, we want Muslims, we want Christians, we want atheists, we want drunks, we want teetotalers, we want everybody. The ethos of rugby is inclusive. So when you have somebody who is on the poster as the finest Australian rugby player of the moment saying things that are not inclusive, things that are absolutely polarising, things saying that, you know, kids that are born gay are going to hell, it is absolute anathema, and we cannot have it in rugby. You can say it, but you can't be wearing the Wallaby jersey, and what's more, you can't be pulling down $1 million a year, mate. That's enough.
Well, Nick Vindon is following this closely and is here to go through it with us now. Nick, really good to see you. Thank you very much for talking to us. Let's talk about matters on the pitch and the bigger problems here for Australian rugby. How disruptive has this saga been, and is it likely to be ahead of the World Cup later this year?
We can't underscore just how polarising this issue has been. It's an absolute dumpster fire for Australian rugby, and it's clear, really, that at least on the players' side of things, on the pitch, the 30-year-old's teammates are really against him. We heard Nick Phipps come out and say that it was good that Rugby Australia took action so quickly. And we've heard Folau's former Wallabies teammates, people like Drew Mitchell, come out against him as well. So it seems to me that Israel Folau's position on the pitch is absolutely untenable within the Wallabies and indeed the Waratahs lineup. No matter what happens with proceedings now that he's contesting it, it's not looking good for Folau on the field. No one's going to pass the ball to him.
So do you think that even if the hearing does go in his favour, you can't see any way back?
That's correct. I really can't. I know that my sources within Rugby Australia pointed out, and it's crucial to know that there are big sponsorship arrangements coming up in play. The Wallabies' major sponsor is an international airline, Qantas. Qantas's CEO, Alan Joyce, is gay, and he's, publicly, Qantas have come out and said they absolutely don't condone, the remarks that have been made by the Wallabies star player. They've got huge influence over Rugby Australia. Their contract's up. They've got the game over a barrel, and they're not going to give Rugby in Australia an option really to keep him. So worst case scenario, Rugby Australia, because they've inked such a bad contract which didn't include a social media clause, they may have to pay him out. So they don't want Israel Folau in the game. The players have said they don't support him. The governing body are telling sponsors that they don't want him involved behind closed doors. The sponsors publicly are saying that they don't condone the remarks and they don't want to have the association with that. Israel Folau's got nowhere to go.
We'll see how it plays out when he has that hearing. Nick, thank you very much for talking to us.